hear the name Ivan the Terrible, you might first think of the 16th century ruler, the man crowned as the first Tsar of Russia who executed thousands, including his own son, in fits of rage. However, there is a second man in history who earned that nickname, a man equally or even more terrible than the first. The Ivan we are talking about was a guard at the notorious Nazi extermination camp Treblinka, and, according to all witness accounts, was the embodiment of evil. In this video, we are going to tell you the story of this sinister character, how he came to be part of the ranks of Nazism, and what was the Operation Reinhardt that gave rise to Treblinka. Get ready to learn about the horror of a man who was more animal than human. Welcome to military history. Operation Reinhardt was the codename given to the systematic murder of Jews in the territories of occupied Poland. The operation is named after Reinhard Heydrich, head of the Reich Security Main Office and one of the architects of Hitler's final solution. This plan was set in motion by the initiative of Odilo Globanik, leader of the police in the Lublin district, as well as other SS members, including Himmler himself. They greenlit the construction of 3 extermination camps as part of the operation. Their names were Belzec, Sobibor, and Treblinka. It was precisely in the latter, which, according to testimonies, was the cruelest of all, where Ivan the Terrible worked as a guard. But how did a Soviet end up joining a Nazi troop? On June 22, 1941, the Third Reich invaded the Soviet Union under the codename Operation Barbarossa. In the first 6 weeks after the German attack, the Soviets suffered catastrophic military losses, with about 5.7 million Red Army soldiers captured. Among them was Ivan Marchenko, who had enlisted in the infantry on May 27, 1941, and was captured by the Germans on July 10th of the same year. However, Marchenko was not killed. Instead, he was sent to the prisoner of war camp A in Chełm, Poland. Later, in October 1941, he was selected for the Travnik camp, where the Nazis trained prisoners of war to work as guards for the SS. Over the course of a year, SS and police officers recruited, processed, and trained 2,500 auxiliary police guards known as the Troniki men, mostly Soviets, as cruel and violent as the Nazis themselves.
מתי שפתחנו את הדלת הזאת, ובפנים היה בערך, אני אומר בערך 400 איש, 350 כולל הילדים. הם היו כולם עומדים, וכשפתחנו הדלת הראשונים נפלו. ואחר כך היה לנו יותר קל להוציא אותם. אני מוכרח להגיד את זה, בונו שלמה. כשהוצאתי את הגוויות וזרקתי אותם למטה, בלשון גסה עם ברירה, מתאי הגזים הייתה רמפה, הייתי חייב לזרוק אותם למטה, ושם לקחו אותם עם האלונקות. כמעט כל אחד ואחד, ודיברנו מהרופאים גם בארץ, כל אחד נאנח. הוציא את האוויר האחרון, כי זה לא היה גז מרעיל, זה היה עשן רק.
During its operation from July 1942 to October 1943, Treblinka was the site of the murder of nearly 1 million Jews and Roma. Like so many other extermination camps, unsuspecting victims arrived by train. Their nightmare was already underway. When the camp guards opened the doors of the train cars, they often found that many of the people had already perished during their long journey, succumbing to thirst, exhaustion, or asphyxiation due to the inhuman overcrowding conditions they faced during the trip. The survivors were pulled out of the trains, nearly unconscious, suffocated by the stench of death that had surrounded them for so long. Then, the guards told them that they had arrived at a transit station where they would be cleaned, washed, and provided with new clothes before embarking on their journey to Ukraine as prisoners. To conceal their murderous intentions, the Nazis even disguised Treblinka to resemble a tourist train stop, equipped with a station clock, schedules, destination signs, and even a fake ticket booth. Nothing so psychologically sinister had ever been seen.
Beside the woman and the small children were led to the barrack, very large barrack, and the woman and the children, they undressed over there. But the men, they undressed themselves all naked, and they were waiting in groups to be let into the gas chambers.
The procedure was systematic and perverse. Men were separated from women and children, and everyone was ordered to undress. Then, the women were sent to have their hair cut, supposedly to prevent lice. But the Nazis actually used the prisoners' hair in making stockings for the crew members aboard German submarines. The next step was to line up the victims and march them towards the showers. Unbeknownst to them, they were walking to their deaths in a gas chamber. It was precisely at this stage of the process that they would encounter the feared Ivan the Terrible. Witnesses say he was tall, well-built, and around 25 years old. Marchenko, along with another sadistic Ukrainian named Nikolai, were in charge of operating Treblinka's gas chambers. The execution method was carbon monoxide poisoning, achieved by feeding the killing chamber with the exhaust from a tank engine connected in an adjacent room. Victims were led to their deaths by Ivan and Nikolai, and many accounts describe how these men ruthlessly delighted in this process, listening to the screams and death cries of the prisoners. Some prisoners from Treblinka described with true terror the actions of Ivan Marchenko. He was tall, and although his eyes seemed kind and gentle, he was a sadist. He enjoyed torturing his victims. As he did so, his face showed a perverse satisfaction, and he laughed and joked. He even became sexually aroused. He treated his victims according to his mood at that moment. One survivor spoke of how he would tear the ears off some of the inmates and nail them to the walls as if they were souvenirs. To others, he would gouge out their eyes and crush them between his fingers while the rest of the prisoners watched in horror.
היה דרך 2-3 מטר אולי, מגודר משני הצדדים ומוסווה עם ענפים שלא ראו שום דבר מה שנעשה, ובתוך השלוח הזה, בתוך ההימלשטראסה, עמדו גרמנים, אוקראינים עם כלבים, והם נשכו בכל חלקי העבר של אנשים, ונכנסו לתאי הגזים.
The procession towards extermination was torture in itself. Rifle butts pushed and shoved, attack dogs bit and tore flesh from bones, while the guards shouted the most abominable of lies. Faster, faster, the water is getting cold, others still have to get under the showers. At the gate, Ivan the Terrible awaited with a diabolical smile. To escape from the beatings and the dogs, the crowd ran towards their unknown death. The commotion lasted only a short time, because soon the doors slammed shut. The chamber filled up. The engine started. It connected to the inlet pipes, and in 25 minutes at most, everyone lay dead, or to be more precise, dead standing. As there wasn't even an inch of free space, the prisoners leaned against each other, lifeless.
נורא היום היה לשמוע את הזעקות ואת הייסורים של האנשים ושל הילדים, וזעקו מה מתתה, ואחרי כמה דקות נחנקו. היה שם גרמני, גוסטף מינסברגר, הוא היה אחראי על תאי הגזים, על הקלפות האלו. הוא עלה על הרמפה, הוא שמע, aufmachen, לפתוח, alles schlaft, כולם ישנים.
To avoid drowning in the gas chamber, Treblinka prisoners faced an even worse fate. Brandishing an iron tube or a sword, Ivan Marchenko brutally cut, whipped, mutilated, and tortured people, especially women and children. There are chilling stories describing how, as female victims headed toward the gas chamber, Marchenko stabbed them in the thighs, genitals, and even amputated their breasts. He also systematically raped prisoners and abused and mutilated children. One of the most harrowing accounts circulating among the prisoners claimed that Ivan, one afternoon when he was in a bad mood, tore a baby from a prisoner's arms and smashed it against the wall, killing the creature inhumanely. In August 1944, prior to the end of the war, the Nazis had already plowed, leveled, and demolished any sign of the atrocities that had occurred in Treblinka. It was the systematic plan of the Third Reich to have the prisoners themselves dismantle these sites of terror, and once the task was completed, they were shot. Former camp guards later testified that Ivan Marchenko had been last seen in Yugoslavia in 1945. Although the Soviets continued to search for him in the following years, the fate of one of the most evil genocidal figures of World War II remained a mystery. However, in the 1970s, legal proceedings were initiated against a man named John Demjanjuk from Cleveland, Ohio. He was accused not only of being a Nazi collaborator during the war, but of being the most notorious of all, Ivan the Terrible. After extradition to Israel, he faced trial charged with crimes against humanity. Demjanjuk claimed it was a case of mistaken identity, although several surviving witnesses positively identified him as the perverse camp guard. In 1988, he was convicted and sentenced to death by hanging. Despite this, in 1993, the Israeli Supreme Court overturned his previous verdict. Although there was definitive evidence that he had served as a camp guard in a Nazi extermination camp, it could not be proven that he was Ivan the Terrible. Demjanjuk returned to the US as a free man, but not for long. In the early 2000s, he was accused of being an SS camp guard who had served at the Sobibor extermination camp. 28,000 counts of accessory to murder were brought against John Demjanjuk. In 2009, he was deported to stand trial in Germany. He was found guilty in 2011 and sentenced to 5 years in prison, although he died in 2012 while his appeal was pending at the age of 91. Due to a technicality, his appeal was still incomplete, and Demjanjuk died as an innocent man in the eyes of the law. We're nearing the end of this installment, and we wanted to ask you, what do you think of the story of this cruel and sadistic character? Leave your opinions in the comments below. That's it for today's video. We thank you for sticking around until the end, and we look forward to seeing you in the upcoming installments of Military History.